Okay, I want to talk to you guys about the bombing that Trump did of Iranian targets after the Iranians shot down an American Apache helicopter. So we had a helicopter that was doing patrol operations off the coastline of Iran because we have enforced a blockade of the Iranian coastline after the Iranians enforced the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz after we engaged in a large-scale bombing operation on Iran with the Israelis. And so essentially, if they were like, we're going to blockade you, we said, well, we're going to blockade you harder. If nothing's getting through the strait, then your stuff is certainly not getting out of your country. And so the Iranians have tried to reshape their shipping routes on land. So put like loading things onto trucks and shipping them through China, trying to rely on their limited pipe infrastructure, trying to use a bunch of tricks of the trade in order to manage their output so they don't have to shut down any of their refineries, shut down any of their production, because if you don't have anywhere to export material, you can't just like keep like just loading. You eventually run out of space and you have to shut down the operation, which costs you money. And considering the current state of the Iranian economy, restarting these oil operations could be quite a problem. And so this is the stalemate that we've been in, where the Iranians are holding much of the international economy hostage as the United States tries to hold the Iranian economy hostage and the threat of further strikes in order to both like try to deny them funds to proxy networks. They talked about regime change. Of course, there's the ever-present focus on the atomic weapons. But as we've seen since the beginning of this, America's focus has been kind of everywhere all at once, where they talked about regime change, they talked about the proxy network, they talked about the nuclear material, further enrichment, who would possess the material, whether it would go to an Iranian ally, no, it would go directly to the United States. It really every single demand you could think of. And through time, we've seen those demands narrow after 100 days of this war, semi-war, patty cake operation, whatever the special military operation, whatever the Trump administration wants to call it. We've seen it narrow where now the Trump administration, from what some of the drafts that have been reported on state, would possibly be giving funds over to the Iranian government. Not only we're talking about the unfreezing of assets, but possibly like rebuilding funds. And we're talking about in possibly like the hundreds of billions, tens of billions, like really massive amounts of money being handed over. While also whether or not the enriched material gets handed over to the United States, stays in Iran. Like a lot of this is still unclear. But as that continues, the Trump administration says repeatedly, we're very close to a deal. We're very close to a deal. We're very close to a deal. They've said we're about like around the corner from a deal like 33 times. It's in the roughly 30 times that this has been said. And they said it one more time yesterday. Then, after saying it one more time yesterday, an American Apache helicopter was shot down. Then after this American Apache helicopter was shot down, and about 2 hours after it was shot down, we were able to recover the two pilots that were in the downed aircraft, and they were brought back into American possession. After that, the Trump administration said they had to respond to this because they judged that it was an Iranian drone that brought down the aircraft, and then they responded by bombing Iran. Now, they bombed a bunch of what you would consider, typical military positions, but according to the Iranians, they also bombed a water treatment facility, and they bombed, other like civilian infrastructure. So you're talking about like a desalination plant, and we're talking about like bombing the infrastructure around a water reservoir. So something that helps power homes as well as something that helps bring like water to homes. Now, this was due to, this is claims from the Iranian government. Al Jazeera is also reporting on this. But there has been no statement published by the American government about whether these strikes hit a desalination plant, about whether these strikes, affected, electricity going to the homes of Iranians across the country. But I will note that the Trump administration did threaten to send Iran back into the Stone Age, talking about targeting the electrical grid before and targeting a lot of things that would, in some instances, depending upon what infrastructure is being supported, could be, legally speaking, allowed under U.S. law. But in other instances, when you're talking about something like sending a country back to the Stone Age, not every electrical power plant is going to be connected to the big death bomb factory. A lot of them are just going to be connected to homes. A lot of them are just going to be connected to office spaces and buildings and things that keep the economy generally running. You know, buildings for public servants and you know, people who street sweep and collect garbage and, you know, do the basics of keeping Iranian society afloat. So I would say that we have to wait a little bit longer. The Iranians have provided footage, but whether or not this is true, the United States government should respond, either by denying it and providing evidence, either with footage or elsewise, or by confirming it and saying how this targeting decision came to be. The United States has, well, of course, the Iranians lie about strikes all the time, both by inflating the amount of damage that was done, and by lying about the nature of certain strikes. So has the United States during this engagement. So has the United States. The United States lied about blowing up a girls' school. And then after lying about blowing up a girls' school, no matter what your position is on, oh, you know, it was this close or that close to this IRGs, we said we didn't. And we did. Killed over 100 school children. And then afterwards, the Trump administration, when it was told, well, look, it was blown up by an American munition, he just said, well, maybe they used one of our munitions against themselves. I mean, he was just going with the flow. Like 100 dead kids, bam, lie. Just no thought put into it. That did not go through any test screening, that did not go through any board where they said, this is the best lie we could come up with. He just, like, from the hip, Trump, as his classic shooting from the hip cowboy self, just said, they did it. They killed their own kids. They bombed their own kids. And because this is the reputation we have built, because Pete Hegseth is out there saying things like, you know, we will accept no quarter, which is not only illegal due to international law, that is illegal due to U.S. law. When we're talking about the U.S. Army Handbook, America has burned through a lot of its reputation. And as America's burnt through much of its reputation, more people are going to listen to when the Iranians come out and said this. Even if this is 100% not true, I now expect of my government in every single one of these instances to go out there and try to disprove it if they didn't, or admit fault. And I expect very little of my government when it comes to, at least right now, I should expect this, but when it comes to this specific government to do it, I expect very little of it when it comes to the latter, the admission of fault. And so right now, the lack of a statement only makes me nervous, because last time their first instinct was to lie on command, and maybe this time their instinct is to just be quiet, because they know that eventually their lives could be torn through, either through people reviewing local cell phone footage, reviewing security cam footage, reviewing satellite photographs, reviewing physical material from the strike itself. If it's a Tomahawk missile, it's kind of hard to argue it was a Iranian air defense systems going awry or something like that. So difficult situation, as always, when it comes to this 100-day of possibly legal war. Now, at this stage, after that strike, the Iranians came to the position that they need to respond again. And so they responded by firing missiles at American bases in Jordan and elsewhere in the Middle East. Now, as far as we know, there have been no American fatalities, either through the downing of the helicopter or through the downing of, or through the striking of American bases. But to Trump, to America's geopolitical position on the global stage, it looks like America just took 1-2. A jab in the form of the helicopter getting shot down, and an American crew having to go through like a 2-hour rescue operation, and then missiles being launched at these bases. Of course, people could see there's depths of complexity to this. Maybe the drone hit the helicopter on purpose. Maybe it didn't. Maybe that you would acknowledge that there were strikes on American bases that were done, but also there were strikes done on Iran, and that did damage as well. But Trump sees the 1-2. And when we're talking about being in Trump's head, when he talks about what to do after this, after more attacks on American bases, when he was saying yesterday, literally yesterday, peace is around the corner, right around the corner. Now he's talking very differently on Truth Social and in public statements. Now he's saying we need to hit, we need to go hard. We hit them hard yesterday, and we're going to hit them hard again today, he said, speaking to reporters in the Oval Office. He has also reiterated a call for Iran to sign a deal. If anybody knows where his Truth Social posts where he talks at length about what he's going to do next, I'd appreciate it if you posted it in chat. I want to read it after this. Iran's President Massoud said in a president on X following Trump's briefing that Iran will stand firm against any pressure or threat. The U.S. launched strikes on Iran on Tuesday after Trump said Iran had shot down a U.S. Army helicopter. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, said it responded with strikes on U.S. bases in the region. Earlier on Wednesday, Trump wrote on his social media account, "They've taken too long to negotiate a deal that would have been great for them. Now they will have to pay the price." This was how he ended the Truth Social post I wanted to read later. He said Iran had been completely defeated militarily. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson, meanwhile, accused the United States of damaging the diplomatic process through the contradictory messages it sends, its repeated shifts in positions and demands, and worst of all, through repeated violations of the ceasefire. He said Iran needed to reassess. Of course, Iran violates the ceasefire as well. He said Iran needs to reassess the situation, adding that any diplomatic process required a minimum of stability. Separately, on Wednesday, the U.S. military said it had struck an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman that had violated the ongoing blockade by attempting to transport oil from Iran. So the United States, while there are boats that still get through, both when it comes to running the Iranian blockade and eventually, sometimes the Iranians try to run the American blockade, there are also tankers trying to run the Iranian blockade that get hit, as has been the case, and Iranian tankers that have been hit. The Indian government said 3 Indian sailors were missing and a 21-member crew had been rescued after an attack on a boat off the coast of Oman. The U.S. is blockading Iranian ports, after the key Strait of Hormuz shipping route was effectively closed. Tuesday's U.S. strikes on Iran, targeting Iranian defense systems, ground control stations, and radar sites near the Strait of Hormuz, that was what they were targeting, according to CENTCOM, as we've already gone through that. Here you can see the blockade, as this is a BBC article that I'm reading off of, so you can see this is sourced from the BBC. So the Strait of Hormuz, that is marked right there, that is where the Iranians are sending basically dinghy boats and placing sea mines in order to dissuade people running the blockade and to act as a threat against American vessels. And then there is, of course, the ever-present threat, even though this is the throat of the world's energy. I can't make that work. This is an ever-present threat in the form of drones from the Iranians. Drones can hit aircraft, as we saw with the Apache helicopter. Drones can hit shipping containers. Drones can hit traditional military craft on the seas. We're talking cruisers. We're talking aircraft carriers. We're talking anything. Hell, if Trump wants to put out that new battleship out on the water, it can get hit by drones too. And so currently, we're waiting for a Trump response. But it has been 100 days into a war where after 90 days, Congress is supposed to get a say. And Congress went out there and they voted against the president's war power resolution to essentially give him the ability to go out there and decide these matters on his own indefinitely. But Trump has done his best to maneuver by not calling this a war, by calling it anything but a war, in order to try to get around Congress's war powers. Because regardless of what the president says about the chief executive's role in making foreign policy decisions, defending the United States, Congress has authority when it comes to the declaration of war. And after a certain period of time, that authority, no matter what you want to do, should lock in, and by the Constitution is supposed to lock in when it comes to their ability to fund or not fund the president's military endeavors. And so if the president wants a stable operation, we have 50,000 to 70,000 American soldiers forward deployed in the Middle East right now that are in the range of Iranian drones, in the range of Iranian missiles. Many of them are in the range of local Iraqi militia rockets, that could be in the range of local militia FPVs, and we've seen FPVs do some damage to Hezbollah as they've, been introduced more and more into the Middle East, and they're gaining experience, they're gaining knowledge, they're gaining technical gear, they're gaining assistance. Some might be from the Russians, some might be like just learning from footage online, some might be from the programs that existed in the Middle East before the war in Ukraine. I mean, many people might forget this, but ISIS actually had, for the time, a somewhat innovative drone program. It was the grenade dropping drones using Mavics during the battle for Raqqa. So, I mean, there is quite a few threats that American soldiers are facing. The American public should get a say, and the American public is generally against the war in Iran. Now, once you get into a war, ending a war is not as simple as like flipping a switch, everything goes out, and then you might put your country in a much worse diplomatic position. You might endanger U.S. soldiers. So I understand it's not that simple, and so if you want to pull out of this, it might take some effort, but this is what happens when you go into a war and then think you can engage in war without any checks and balances. You hurt the country. The American people voted to have Trump in power, to give him these powers, and Trump then overreached from those powers and has now hurt the country when it comes to the gas tank, and has hurt the country when it comes to its long-term security interests in ending the war in Ukraine by helping the Russians to fuel the war effort by giving them exemptions when it comes to their fuel, and so they're able to make an extra at least 250 million more greenbacks in order to flush it into the war machine, into artillery production, into drone production, into military contracts. And so, I mean, the only way this can end up benefiting America's long-term strategic interests is if we somehow really do get the Iranians to agree to give up their atomic weapons. But if we get something that looks in any capacity similar to Obama's deal, then what was the point of this whole charade to begin with? What was the point of this? I mean, even if you get a lack of sunset provision, at the end of the day, do we not think we couldn't have gotten that after a decade or 15 years of the framework that we had, without the need for the use of all these munitions, for the blown up schools, for all the, American, Iranian, and other casualties, as other people have been caught in the crossfire? I mean, these are all questions we need to ask ourselves. And when the president engages in wars of choice after making bold promises that he could not deliver on for how much he set back the Iranian nuclear weapons program, Congress should have a say. And we shouldn't trust this man to go out on a limb on his own to engage in these types of operations. But quite frankly, we shouldn't trust any president to do this, whether it's a future Democratic administration or a Republican administration. That's not to say that it's not possible for them to, hit it right or be in the right place at the right time and make the right call. But when it comes to these types of long-term forward deployments, where we're not, sending aid and another party is fighting on their own, or we're giving intelligence assistance, or doing X, Y, and Z, but we're putting our soldiers in harm's way that we're going to have to sustain, that we're going to have to do the lion's share of the payment in both blood and gold, yeah, Congress should have a say. And Trump's adherence to the philosophy that it all goes down to him, that you just kind of follow his decision-making, it leads to the country being in difficult positions like this. But that does not mean Trump should lead us by the nose. If there would have been a clean vote on this type of operation, this type of war with Iran in advance, I don't think Congress would have given it, which is why Trump decided to engage in it this way and follow basically the Israeli signal for what they wanted to do. They decided to use the opportunity that the Israelis were offering them without any congressional oversight. And so here we are. And so, I mean, you think about the candidates like Graham Plattner, who are going through endless amount of scandals, from tattoos to sexting to whatever, right? Endless amount of scandals. Why is it that he is so resilient? Why is it the fact that no matter what poll you look at, Graham Plattner is within single-digit swinging range of Susan Collins? Either he's ahead in single digits or he's barely behind in single digits. The reason why, in part, is because he is a veteran who did 4 tours, sometimes for the United States military, sometimes for the, for a private military contractor. and he has seen these wars firsthand, and he has a very anti-war message. And this type of political kerfluffle, I don't know what you want to call it, this type of engagement, this boxed in position Trump has put himself in, is not that favorable in today's politics. He's already run twice, so maybe he's thinking he can't win a third term, so time to do all of the unpopular things he wanted to do anyway the whole time. People forget Trump was in favor of the invasion of Iraq until the invasion of Iraq started to have any complications whatsoever. Then he jumped ship. Trump has been the purest example of a chicken hawk when it comes to his public record over the last 25, 30 years of commentary in war making and foreign affairs, where it is, well, we're going to invade Iraq. Let's invade Iraq. Oh, never mind. This is a bad idea. Now that we've already invaded Iraq and it's too late to change your mind. Okay, well, you know what? I am in favor of supporting Ukraine. I'm going to sign the legislation to allow the aid to be sent over. In fact, if I get reelected, I'm going to surge aid if the Russians don't, support. Oh, never mind. Fuck you. Fuck the Ukrainians. I reverse course. Well, when it comes to, a war with Iran, I am the candidate you don't vote for if you don't want war. I'm against new wars. Stephen Miller's out on the campaign trail saying, if you want a war with Iran, vote for Kamala Harris. Now that he's in office, he's switched course. And now that he's in the war, he wants to switch course again. So, I mean, when it comes to chicken hawk type behavior, you can accuse John Bolton of that. John Bolton, people who are conceived of as neocons and are neocons, people who are conceived of as hawkish in public debate, these people are usually given this, definition. But I think the draft dodger easily gets that definition as well. Is this the Truth Social post? Oh boy, thank you. Oh, no, Truth Social was not available in Ukraine.